So we've looked at some anatomy as it relates to the life cycles of the different plant groups. But now we're going to get into a little more detail about plant anatomy, and this most specifically applies to angiosperms. And we'll start with the plant organs. So you've got roots, stems, and leaves, and those are the basic structures of plants. The roots are mostly submerged, or generally submerged in the soil. Stems are above ground and then lead into our leaves. So we'll start with roots. Roots can have multiple functions, but generally they help anchor the plant in the soil and also help to absorb nutrients from the soil. They can also store carbohydrates, so this is a large tuber plant which has lots of starch in it. There are different types of roots. So for dicots, and we'll go over differences between dicots and monocots in a minute, they have a taproot, one large taproot, and then branches off of that taproot are lateral roots. And so the first structure that grows from the seed is the taproot, and then any structures growing off from that, extending from that, are lateral roots. They also have these very fine root hairs which help to absorb nutrients. In monocots, the embryonic root dissipates, and instead you have adventitious roots which grow from the stem. And I just talked about the root hairs. All right, so stems are organs that raise or separate leaves. They are made of nodes, these parts here where you have buds coming off of them, and internodes, which are basically the points between the nodes. There are different types of emerging leaves. You have axillary buds, which is where the stem and leaf diverge, and then you have the apical bud, which is at the tip of the stem, at the very top. Stems can also be modified to have different functions other than just structural support for leaves. They can also be important for asexual reproduction. So stolons are formed from stems. They can be for storage, such as bulbs, and they can also be for anchorage, such as, in the case you would call them rhizomes. So leaves are the main photosynthetic organ. They are generally flattened, and their flattened parts angled towards the sun to collect sunlight for photosynthesis. Stems are green, and they can also help too. They are formed from different portions. You have the petiole, which attaches it to the stem, and then the blade, which is the leaf part. The veins then within it comprise the vasculature, so the xylem and phloem, to help transport sugars and water. You can have parallel or branched veins. Generally, monocots are parallel and dicots are branched. They can also be simple compound or doubly compound. So this is a simple leaf, meaning the blade is just one continuous structure. This is a compound leaf, where you have the leaf breaking into smaller leaflets which do not touch each other. And you can also have a doubly compound, where the leaflet is actually also a compound structure of smaller leaflets. Leaves can also be modified for storage, reproduction, and or support. All right, so within these different organs, you have different types of tissues. The dermal tissue system is for the outer covering and protective part of the plant, and it can be broken up into different layers as well. So the epidermis is the single layer of tightly packed cells which cover the plant. Sometimes a cuticle or waxy layer is present, and is present on most leaves to prevent water loss. And the periderm, which replaces the epidermis in the older regions of woody plants, and this is important for protection, preventing water loss, and preventing disease. The vascular tissue system is for allowing nutrients and water to be transported to different parts of the plant. The xylem conducts the water, and the phloem conducts the sugars, generally from photosynthesizing parts to the needed areas. But if they're in a seasonal habitat, in the winter time when their photosynthesis is at a minimum, they may go from the storage areas, such as in the roots, up to different areas that need it. The stele then is the center ring of vascular tissue of a root or a stem. The ground tissue system is neither vascular or dermal, and is mostly supportive. You have the pith, which is internal to the vascular tissue, so this purple spots are the vascular tissue. This would be the pith. The cortex, which is external to the vascular tissue, and it can be for storage, photosynthesis, or support. All right, there are different types of cells then which make up these different tissues. So parenchyma cells are the metabolically functional part of the plant. So this is where photosynthesis occurs, and also is the fleshy parts of fruits. Collenchyma support young parts or shoots. You have sclerenchyma. These have lots of lignin in them and are found in hard seed coats and in fibers. You have the water-conducting cells of the xylem, including tracheids and vessels, and then the sugar-conducting cells of the phloem, which include sieve tube elements. Tracheids and vessels are dead at maturity, so they once they mature and die, they are simply for conduction. The sieve tube elements, though, remain alive at maturity. All right, so based on the arrangement of these tissues and cells and different structures, you can classify angiosperms into two different groups, monocots and dicots or eudicots. Eudicots have two cotyledons in the seed, and this is part of the structure that eventually becomes the leaves and the stem. Monocots have one cotyledon. The veins in the leaves are usually branched in eudicots and parallel in leaves. The vascular system is a ring in dicots and is scattered in monocots. We mentioned this before, dicots usually have a taproot. Monocots usually have adventitious roots. When you look at the pollen grains on dicots have 3 apertures or openings on them, and the pollen grains in monocots have 1 opening. And finally, when you look at the flowers petals and sepals are generally in multiples of 4 or 5 in dicots, and in multiples of 3 in monocots. And so here's some examples of cotyledon. So if it's a monocot, it has 1 cotyledon here, and in dicots you have 2. Veins are branching, the veins are parallel, the vascular tissue is scattered. Here the vascular tissue is in a ring. The openings or apertures of pollen, you have 3 on dicots, 1 on monocots. The roots are sprawling and adventitious. Eudicots generally have a taproot. And finally, the floral organs in multiples of 3 or 4 or 5. Okay, that's it for plant anatomy.